What's up, everyone? Matt Gajewski here, back again early on a Sunday morning after daylight savings. But it's all excitement here because we're talking college basketball on this March 9th championship Sunday. Not in the high majors, but we have a few champions that will be crowned today. Had a few yesterday. SEMO, Southeastern Missouri, gets crowned their champion, first auto bid clinched. And we had a de facto bid clinched, I guess I'll say, with St. Thomas being ineligible. We get Omaha going in. But a couple more conference champions today. We have other conference tournaments just starting. We have the Big Ten ending its regular season, the American ending its regular season. Mercifully, we don't have to watch Washington ever again this year. So it's a fantastic day. There's a ton of good basketball, and I can't wait to get into it. So let's start right there. We'll begin with the bigger conferences and sort of work our way down today. First up, Michigan takes on Michigan State in the rivalry game to close the season. This is a spread, 7 points in favor of Sparty, the home team. Totals 148. Only injury is Sam Walters, so nothing really to note. The rotations are pretty intact. It's a rematch from February 21st. Michigan State won 75-62 on Michigan's home floor. Spartans held the Wolverines to 24% from three, forced 15 turnovers, which everyone does. And they out-rebounded Michigan 34-25, and 14 of those came on the offensive glass. That's a really important matchup in this game with Michigan's roster. As far as the Spartans go, they already clinched the regular season title. Some people might call motivation into question. It's good that they put this rivalry at the end of the season, similar to Duke, North Carolina. That did have some stakes as far as seeding in the AAC tournament or the ACC tournament, but these rivalries add extra motivation to games. So I think this is still going to be highly competitive. Michigan State has some outside chances to improve their seed, depending on what happens in some of the other conference tournaments too. So I think it's full go for Sparty. They're 5-1 against the top 25, beat Illinois twice, Purdue, Maryland, and their best win is against number 10, Wisconsin. 3 losses outside the top 30 to 48 Memphis, 60 USC, and 45 Indiana. And I think best of all, a lot of that body of work on the positive end came in the last month. 4 of the top 25 wins they have came in the last month. 5 of those wins were in the top 30. I mean, this is a great resume that they've put on paper lately. One of the hottest teams in the country, without a doubt. Michigan's the opposite. They're 2-4 against the top 25. They beat Wisconsin and Purdue. 4 losses outside the top 30, and some of these are pretty bad on the low end, especially that Wake Forest loss at 79. Then they dropped to Arkansas, Oklahoma, and 89 Minnesota. But unlike Michigan State, Michigan's dropped 3 of their last 5. I will say all of those did come to top 20 teams. So it's concerning, but at least you're not losing more games like the Minnesota one. Stylistically, both teams play really tall lineups. Both teams are great at rebounding. Michigan State's actually a little better in the rebounding metrics, despite being a little shorter. Michigan's the second tallest team in the country with Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf, but Michigan has better rebounding numbers overall. Michigan won that battle pretty convincingly in the first game as well. So I will say this played out kind of as expected. As far as the shooting stuff goes, I think there's a lot of nuance here because Michigan State is actually decent at shooting, and that's despite having a horrible three-point percentage. They're 341st. But they still come in 156 in effective field goal because they do not shoot a lot of threes. They prefer to attack the rim, live on the glass. That is technically the strength of Michigan's defense on paper. They're 24th on the interior, 67th on the perimeter. I just like seeing that we have a previous matchup where Michigan still had success against this kind of defense. And you look at Michigan, you see the better shooting numbers, 34th in effective field goal percentage, 155th from 3, 7th from the interior. There's a lot of nuance here. This has actually dropped their three-point percentage from 155 to 231 since January 1st. Since February 1st, that's dropped to 347. If you just isolate February 1st and onward, Michigan is 347th at three-point percentage. Michigan State is 255th. Michigan State, the better three-point shooting team over the last month. Who would have thought? It's been a real rough go for Michigan out there. And they still have good shooters. I'm a little concerned about Trey Donaldson and Amari Burnett. Their season-long numbers are still at 39+% from 3. They've regressed a little bit of late, but those are strong numbers. If they hit their threes, that could be an avenue to success. It's really Danny Wolf who's plummeted. His three-point percentage has dropped precipitously. And the other problem for Michigan experiencing positive regression is Michigan State's defense is 7th in the country. They're 5th in perimeter defense. It's not the easiest matchup to experience some positive regression here. I'm pretty worried about this. And Michigan State still won the first matchup with Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf putting up 32. Those guys did all of the work. They didn't get a lot from other players. So if you're not going to get Donaldson and Burnett hitting any threes, you can sort of live with Vlad and Danny getting theirs as long as Michigan State continues to play their game, effort, defend, offensive rebounds. Those are paths to success. On the turnover stuff, we always like to look at the Michigan turnover margin because they are 332nd in the country at turnovers committed. Michigan State doesn't force a lot of them. They're 236 at turnovers forced. But funny enough, that was enough in the first game. We saw Michigan with 15 turnovers. I wouldn't be surprised if we see something similar to that. Again, expecting Sparty to go all out in this game. We missed the opening number. You could have grabbed Sparty minus like a 6.5. We kind of make this right between the 6.5 and the 7 number. So it was basically efficient from the start. I prefer the Michigan State side. I know I said lean on Michigan on the screen. That's just mathematically, we make this inside the 7. It's like 6.7 or something really, really close to the spread anyway. But optics-wise, recent play-wise, weakness versus strength-wise, I do think Sparty is the superior team in this game. I'm just not going to take it. This is about as close to an efficient spread to me as I think you could possibly have in a game like this. So we will move to our next game. Oregon takes on Washington in the Big Ten. Yes, the Big Ten. Oregon is a 7.5-point favorite on the road, 146.5 total for in the home spot. Washington, I believe this is their senior day, but Washington is not eligible for the Big Ten tournament. They lost too many games already. So the motivation stuff, which is very important for some of these teams closing their conference season, it goes both ways with Washington. It's their last game. Maybe they play with no holds barred. Also, they could be just dead in the water and the season's already ended, so why would they play hard? I don't know which way it's going to go, but you'll hear narratives both ways. It is a rematch. Oregon won 82-71. They were at home, held Washington to 19% from 3, crushed Washington on the glass, 37-24, forced 5 more fouls. It was just a complete routing, and that's how it is basically when Washington plays in this conference. Oregon's 4-3 against the top 25. They beat A&M, Bama, Maryland, and Wisconsin. 2 of those wins, I mean, in Vegas, Oregon was on an absolute tear, knocking off like Alabama and stuff. My goodness. They have 2 losses outside the top 50, lost to Minnesota and Nebraska, who's right at 50. And they took a 5-game losing streak in conference, but this is still a good body of work, even though that happened. And I still kind of like this Oregon team as a buy low, depending on where they get seeded in the tournament. But Washington, 2 wins in the top 50. They beat Maryland somehow, and then Northwestern at 46. Both were at home. They have 6 losses outside the top 50. They did lose to Seattle, who's 140. Washington, again, has been eliminated from the Big Ten tournament. So if they are playing hard, it's going to be for pride. Washington, their seeding height, their seeding rebounding. Oregon's 21st in height, 121st in rebounding. Washington, 225th in rebounding. This matchup played out, I guess, basically as expected in the first game. And that was with Nate Biddle committing 4 fouls. He did not have the cleanest game. And still a pretty stark advantage for Oregon. Shooting-wise, it's all Oregon. They're 119th in effective field goal with some positive regression due in the 3-point area. They're only 150th there, but I think you're probably going to see them shoot better. I hope at least, because Brandon Angel and TJ Bamba are way below their career averages. But anyway, Washington's horrible on defense. Aside from what you see on the screen, 264 inside, 263 outside. I mean, and plus, Shellstad and Bartholomew are still at 39% from 30. We're expecting regression from Angel and Bamba, but we already have 2 guys that don't need it. So, I mean, this is a pretty good shooting team. Washington's outside the top 100 in total offense. They're 214th in 2-point percentage, 132nd in 3-point percentage. Oregon's biggest weakness is on the interior somehow. They're 173rd there, which doesn't line up with any of Washington's strengths. The players that kind of prop up this shooting to where it is are Mekhi Mason and Tyler Harris. They're both at 42% from 3 or more. And their numbers are kind of held down because DJ Davis is taking way more threes than those 2, and he's at 34%. So one way to correct your offense in the last game of the year might be more threes for Harris and Mason, less for Davis, and see where that takes you. But then in the periphery, turnover margin, foul margin, both vastly favor Oregon. Washington has one player in the top 100 most efficient players in the conference. It's Great Osibor, and he's 86th. It's a horrible team. Oregon can't lose games like this. They're not really – they'll make the tournament. They're not live to miss it, but you can't drop games like this if you want to be a decent seed and maybe be like a 7 or something. I missed the 6.5 with Oregon. I saw it, didn't play it, was worried about some of the motivation stuff with Washington because it is a road game for Oregon and it is senior night, last game of the year. So there are some nuances you could talk yourself into on the Washington side for why they might be ready. But we made that outside the 6.5 right away. Now it's closer to efficient for us. With narratives playing a role, I'm less likely to play this spread at the 7.5, being pretty efficient. But it's an Oregon or pass for me. This is just a substantially better team. If this game was played on like February 20th, would probably be smashing Oregon here. So if those of you that aren't concerned with any narratives, I think Oregon's the side you can play. And there's still a pretty good chance that I play this. Not really all that scared of a Washington team. Even when they try, they're horrible. Also, if you like this video, liking, subscribing, leaving a comment helps a lot. A lot of you have done that, and I appreciate you. The channel has grown a lot over the last 2 weeks, and we're still not even halfway to being able to monetize Subwise. So one thing you could do if you do enjoy this and want to support for free with just a second out of your day is hit the subscribe button. It matters a ton for these channels, and I thank you if you've done it. Conference championships. We're going to start in the ASUN. North Alabama takes on Lipscomb. Whoever wins punches their ticket to the dance. It's a 5-point spread in favor of Lipscomb. These are played at home. The ASUN plays their tournaments at home sites, 143 total. Regular season was split between these teams. The home team won both times. North Alabama took the first game 74-64. And they rebounded Lipscomb 41-26. A pretty crazy rebounding percentage, and they held Lipscomb to 25% from 3, which is a bit surprising. Lipscomb took the second one, 75-63. Kind of the same thing. They outshot North Alabama. They out-rebounded them 33-28, so not quite as stark as the rebounding advantage North Alabama had in the first game, but nearly a carbon copy of the first game just in favor of Lipscomb, and that home court meant a lot. To get here, North Alabama beat number 7 Austin Peay. That's their conference seeding. That was a crushing 90-64. They also beat Jacksonville. A double-digit win for them as well. Lipscomb had a little bit of a scare. They beat Central Arkansas in their first-round game. Nothing to worry about there. But then they took Queens to overtime, barely getting the win in that game. And Queens obviously super motivated because they can't make the NCAA tournament. The conference tournament meant everything to them, but you still get Lipscomb coming out ahead. In the nuances of the scheduling, Lipscomb won the regular season title. They went 7-8 against the top 200. Their best win came over Chattanooga at 111. They have just one loss outside the top 200. It did come to Queens in the regular season, and they played some pretty close games against good teams. The only time they lost by more than 10 this year, and they lost to Queens by exactly 10 in one of the games they played. They played Arkansas and Kentucky. Those are the only times this team lost by double digits. Very good body of work for Lipscomb. North Alabama is 5-7 against the top 200. Their best win came over Lipscomb in the regular season. They have 2 losses outside the top 200. They dropped games to 230 Northwestern State and Queens. They have 5 losses by double digits, just for the sake of comparison. On the actual court, North Alabama plays a small lineup at 279th in effective height, but they rebound. They're 92nd there. Lipscomb, a little bit different. They're 104th in effective height, but 151st in rebounding. The real difference is North Alabama is 77th on the offensive glass. Lipscomb is 329th. The opposite is true on the defensive end, where Lipscomb has a stark advantage. So this comes more down to philosophical differences. Lipscomb just trying not to get cooked in transition. Gets back on defense rather than attacking the offensive glass. North Alabama, they prefer to attack the offensive glass. So it's a decent stylistic matchup. I think that's why you see the rebounding kind of ebbing and flowing both games. Lipscomb actually comes in slightly behind North Alabama in total offensive efficiency, but they have severe shooting advantages. They're 22nd in effective field goal percentage, 18th in 2-point, 55th from 3. They have 3 of the 4 most efficient offensive players in the country. Jacob Agnesevich, I'm not sure how to say it, which is a shame because he's from Wisconsin. I should know this. So I'm sorry, Jacob, and your family, if you're watching this video. I'll be cheering for you because you're a Wisconsin kid, but pronunciation, not my strength. I'm working on it. Aside from him, Joe Anderson, Will Pruitt, also in the top 4. And Ognesevic is probably the most dangerous because he spaces the floor. He shoots 42% and he's 6'8". So he's a very difficult player to cover. North Alabama's not bad on offense, though, obviously. 113th in effective field goal percentage, 102nd from 3, 146 from 2. They do have the most efficient player in the offense, whereas Lipscomb has 2 of the top 4. So it's like number 1 is Jakari Land for North Alabama, and then 2, 3, and 4 on Lipscomb, which is a little more imbalanced, but Land is awesome. Shoots 43% from 3, plays that point guard position for North Alabama. But then on defense, that's where we have some gaps. Lipscomb outranks North Alabama 127 to 179 overall. On the interior, that gap extends. Let's see. Lipscomb is 161st in the interior, 42nd on the perimeter. North Alabama is 222nd on the interior, 86th on the perimeter. So both of those advantages go to Lipscomb. Peripherally, honestly, no real advantages. Both these teams are awesome. Both of them don't commit turnovers ever. We have 2 top 20 teams, and then neither team commits fouls that much. I mean, this is a great matchup on paper. Make sure you watch this game. It's going to be awesome. Mathematically, we favor North Alabama in this game despite playing on the road. It's very efficient, though, coming in close to the 5. I'm going to lean them. I don't think their path to actually winning the game is maybe quite as clean as we're seeing on the screen. And it's really hard for me to bet against, my Wisconsin biases with Ognesevic. So I'm probably just going to stay away and see where this line goes throughout the day, potentially play something a little bit later. Before we move on, if you or somebody knows a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. You must be 21 or older to play in most areas. Closing out the American regular season, North Texas takes on Temple. 5.5 point spread in favor of North Texas. Total is 135.5. Injuries in this game. We haven't talked about a lot of injuries. Most of them have been clean games, and you'll see that in conference tournaments. Guys are going to play through injuries. But in this game, North Texas has been up without Jonathan Massey. He's more of a rotational player. Temple's been without their stud, Jamal Mashburn. Shane Dizzoni missed their last game with an illness. They did return a couple guys of late. Quant Berry, Steve Settle, we'll talk about them. But it's the Jamal Mashburn show for Temple. I think they're holding him out to the conference tournament. That's obviously in one game. This is a rematch from January 22nd. North Texas 176-67 at home. Despite shooting 25% from 3, they out-rebounded Temple. They shot 34 free throws. Temple fouled 22 times. Temple didn't have Elijah Gray, but crazy that North Texas still wins games by nearly double digits, shooting 25% from beyond the arc. With a win, North Texas locks up the 2 seed in the American. They're 2-4 against the top 100, beating Minnesota and Oregon State at 89-80. They have 2 losses outside the top 100 to UTSA and UAB. So it's a lot of beating exactly who you're expected to and losing only to the top end of your schedule. A good body of work for North Texas. Temple's underachieved considering what they spent in NIL on Jamal Mashburn. 1-5 against the top 100. Their only good win is against Memphis. They have 10 losses outside the top 100. They have 3 losses outside the top 200. Drop games to LaSalle, Tulsa, and Charlotte. Tulsa being the worst at 287. Jamal Mashburn has not played in 5 games. We'll see if he plays in this one. I wouldn't expect it. Dizzoni could play. He missed with an illness, but I don't know. Temple's still healthier than they've been. It seems like they're just playing for the conference tournament, which I get. You can't make an at-large case for Temple, but I don't know. I'm not 100% sure what they're doing. North Texas already outranks Temple in plenty of statistical categories, though. Effective height, 111 to 138. In rebounding, it's even worse, 33 to 172. Temple is really bad at defensive rebounding. They're 278th somehow. North Texas is 97th in effective field goal, 173 from 2, 44 from 3. Temple's defense is horrible, and they're 180th on the interior, 171st from 3. Atten Wright is shooting 42% from 3 for North Texas. I mean, you just have so many matchup advantages for the mean green here. Temple is also not that good at shooting. 230th in effective field goal, 291 in 2-point, 70th from 3. That is where they do most of their work. But the weird thing is they don't shoot a lot of threes. 339th in 3-point rate. And Jamal Mashburn's their best 3-point shooter. He's been out for 5 games. He shoots 42% from 3. They did get back Steve Settle, who also shoots 42% from 3, so that'll help a bit. But man, I mean, This is about as bad of a stylistic matchup as you can drop in this conference. You can beat North Texas if you can turn them over. That is one weakness for North Texas. They're 197th in turnovers committed. But Temple forces turnovers at just about the lowest rate in this conference. They're 300th in turnovers forced. Temple also pretty good at generating fouls. North Texas will commit them, so I guess that's an advantage. But man, we don't know if Mashburn's going to play. I think he's doubtful. And then on top of that, when you have all of these stylistic advantages, when Mashburn's in the lineup, I mean, I don't even know if it matters that much. It certainly does, but man, we played the North Texas minus the 5. It's currently moved to 5.5. A little worried, I guess, about North Texas playing on the road this late in the season, but man, they still have stuff to play for, and this Temple team might just be dead in the water. We'll play the North Texas side. Next up, we have Winthrop taking on High Point. Just a note on this game and all the games moving forward. It was daylight savings. It's a quick turnaround to get to these games. A lot of them did not finish till late last night. This is not one of those, but I have not gotten all my ducks in a row. Obviously ran the model enough to get point spreads, totals, projections. Normally I have these cute little write-ups where everything's all laid out statistically. I do not have that for these games, so it's going to be me reading more from the model. So just excuse perhaps a few extra pauses here and there. I wanted to talk about these games, and this is just the way it's going to have to be. Might be a little slower, but we'll still get there. Anyway, this is the Big South Championship. Winthrop is an 8.5-point underdog against High Point, 159.5 total. This is about as wide as you're going to get for some of these champions, but High Point has been on an absolute tear. They're far and away the highest power ranked team in this conference. High Point beat Gardner-Webb 85-64 in the first round. Then they beat Radford, who is pretty decent. They're 152 overall. That was 76-73. Both those games coming in the last 2 days. They'll play back-to-backs in this conference tournament. Winthrop, they beat Longwood and UNC Asheville, who were both outside the top 200, so they had an easier path for sure. In the regular season, High Point won both of the matchups they played. They play home and homes. They won both of them by 22 points on the road and at home. And I went into these matchups, they just shot the ball better. There's not really that much more to say. High Point's just better almost across the board. They're 9-2 against the top 200. They have a win over 104 UAB in the high end. They have 3 losses outside the top 200, Missouri State, Asheville, and Longwood. Winthrop's body of work is much worse. They are 1-7 against the top 200. Their lone win came against Radford. They also have 3 losses outside the top 200 to Georgia Southern, Gardner-Webb, and Asheville. As far as the stylistics in this game go, have those pulled up right now. We have High Point with advantages in both offense and defense. High Point is 93rd in effective height. Winthrop is 289th. On the glass, High Point is 56th. Winthrop is 183rd. Offensive rebounding also favors High Point in this game. There's no major injuries. Shooting-wise, High Point is 12th in effective field goal percentage, 12th on the inside, and 47th from 3. The biggest place you can exploit this Winthrop defense is shooting threes. They're 288th in perimeter defense. Winthrop's not a bad shooting team themselves. They do rely on interior scoring, which is a huge problem against a much taller team. Again, High Point's nearly 200 ranking slots ahead of Winthrop in effective height. Their defense is strongest inside. High Point does not play elite defense, ranking 201, but they're 68th at interior defense, 135th at three-point defense. It's not a good matchup for Winthrop stylistically in this game. And then on the margins, I suppose if you were to rank someone in turnover margin, Winthrop would have a slight advantage. But man, I mean, neither of these teams particularly stand out in terms of turnovers forced or turnovers drawn. Foul margin could be an issue for High Point at some point. Winthrop is the #1 team at drawing fouls in the country. And High Point is 31st at fouls committed, but it's just not like it's much better on the other side. High Point also draws a ton of fouls. They're 39th. And Winthrop is 300th in fouls committed. So, I mean, this is just as much of an advantage for High Point as it is for Winthrop. As far as picking a side or a total in this game, we make this inside the 8.5, just for reference mathematically. But I do not see High Point losing this game. We just mentioned about 18 advantages they hold. I don't even know if Winthrop has a single advantage in this game. It's probably just the slightest in terms of foul margin and turnover margin. But man, High Point is on an absolute war path getting to the NCAA tournament, they're going to be a dangerous double-digit seed. I do not think their defense is good enough to make a run, but it is going to be high point or pass in this game. In an awesome conference championship in the Big South, the second one we've talked about today, I'll be a little more interested in the ASUN, but this one is good too. And obviously, we are running a little short on time. I don't have as many plays on the slate. We're about to talk about a couple more, but there's going to be more thrown into our Discord throughout the day. If you're interested in Discord, the link is below. What you get: sides and totals, projections for both, for every game on the slate. We do player projections for all the major games. And recently, with conference tournaments getting a little more viewership, books have been offering player props on smaller conferences. I imagine some of the championship games will have player props today. We'll have those projected. Minutes, points, rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, everything you could possibly imagine. If it's a major stat, we'll have it projected. And then still working on that March Madness tool. Made a lot of progress yesterday after working through some bugs, but we'll get there. All that's below if you were interested. The Missouri Valley Championship. Bradley takes on Drake. There's no major injuries. This is a 2.5-point spread in favor of Drake. A really slow game. The total is 120.5. To get here, Bradley knocked off Murray State, who is a pretty good team. They're 143. That was a 70-62 game. Then they played Valpo in their last game, who was 214. Valpo had a couple of upsets and nearly upset this Bradley team to get to Drake, but ultimately couldn't do it. Drake played Southern Illinois, who had a pretty bad injury in that game. That was not a very convincing win to me, even though they won 70-53. It just is what it is. Drake was expected to do that. So don't look too much into it. They did beat Belmont, who's 129 in their last game, and got a real scare. They were down at halftime. But they win 57-50 in a greasy game, which Drake is wont to play. As far as these teams in the regular season, they split, and the road team won both times. Drake won the first one, 64-57. Really, what that came down to is they just shot nearly double the free throws. In the second matchup, Bradley outshot Drake. Even though they still had a foul problem in that game, they just shot the ball so well that they were able to overcome Drake. And this is kind of the case that we'll see today. I think both these teams are elite at shooting. They just play slow. Drake is 3-1 against the top 100. They beat Vanderbilt. They beat Kansas State. They have 2 losses outside the top 100 to Illinois, Chicago, and Murray State. Bradley's 2-3 against the top 100. One of those wins coming against Drake, but they also beat San Francisco. 3 losses outside the top 100 to Illinois, Chicago, Belmont, and Illinois State. Stylistically, again, 2 offensive teams that should have success. Both these teams can shoot. Bradley's 6th in effective field goal percentage. Drake is 57th. Bradley is the number 1 3-point shooting team in the country. Drake is 87th. Bradley takes a lot more threes, but Drake can still shoot the threes if needed. On the inside, it's not like Bradley's a slouch, though. They're 63rd in 2-point percent. Drake is 54th. As far as height, Bradley's significantly taller. They're 55th. Drake is 331st. Still, Drake attacks the glass, especially on the offensive side. 14th in total rebounding. Bradley's 96th. On the offensive glass, Drake is 16th. Bradley 264th. It's more of a stylistic choice. Bradley's plenty capable on the defensive end, which I think should neutralize Drake a little bit in this game. But then defensively, Bradley's worse. They're 123rd in total defense. Drake is 59th, but I think this requires some digging. Bradley 57th in interior defense. Drake is 298th. In the perimeter, Bradley's 78th in 3-point defense. Drake is 91st. The real reason Bradley's defensive numbers are drugged down is this team doesn't force turnovers. They're 288th in turnovers forced. Drake is 279th in turnovers committed. So that is kind of a neutral matchup. On the other side, Drake is 14th in turnovers forced, where Bradley's 197th in turnovers committed, which is certainly an advantage for Drake. Foul margin is pretty even between these teams. So to kind of break it down, I think Bradley's defense might be a little better than people actually think. Turnovers forced, you're playing a half-court team in Drake anyway, who's reducing possessions. So I'm not really super worried about that. You shoot the ball well. You're better in shooting metrics. You have the better actual defensive numbers inside and out. It's just turnovers dragging you down super far. I'm seriously considering Bradley right now. And I don't think I would have done this had I not done the video in the breakdown here, actually diving into it. I'm going to look at the current spread. Bradley at 2.5. This is actually pretty likely to end up on my card, I think, right now. I've been a Bradley fan. I actually bet Bradley in the most recent matchup these teams had, and luckily got a cover because they were playing on the road. But man, this is a decent amount of points. We make it almost efficient. I wouldn't say there's a lot of value in this, but it's going to be a Bradley or pass for me. Let's get to the Summit Championship. This is a game we did play, but there is some nuance required for the Summit League. St. Thomas is a 4.5-point favorite over Omaha. The total is 150.5. No major injuries, but first and foremost, St. Thomas not eligible to play in March Madness. They're still transitioning from D3, actually. This team, rather than jump to D2 and then to D1, they were a D3 team that jumped all the way up. But they're still in their probationary period, can't win. We've seen this a lot of years. These teams typically come in pretty motivated to win their games because this is essentially everything you can play for. We just saw Queens give a game to Lipscomb in this very same situation. But I hesitate to really handicap anything in this game based on that motivation because Omaha historically has just been so damn bad that they might as well be a D2 team transitioning up to. This team is almost never live in this conference. They win it outright. They now have a chance to win the conference tournament and go to March Madness. This is essentially an opportunity for Omaha to win their version of the Summit League Triple Crown. So I think they're going to be motivated. They're just not in this position very often. And they did run hot to get here. And they also ran extremely hot to get to March Madness, starting with St. Thomas not being eligible. But you also had essentially the starting point guard for South Dakota State, Terrace ACL, the best player in the conference player in the year, Jackson Money, go down for North Dakota State. So then, the run out for these two teams to get here has been pretty easy. You have St. Thomas beating 309 Denver, and then they beat 264 North Dakota because of an upset over South Dakota State. Omaha was pretty similar. They beat Kansas City in the first round, but then they got to play South Dakota in the second round, who upset North Dakota State. So, it's been a pretty good run out for these two teams, but I do think to sum all of that up, motivation will be at an all-time high for both programs. These teams split the regular season. Omaha beat St. Thomas at home by 11 points. They dominated on the glass, shot more threes. It was a pretty clean game. They also forced 23 fouls and shot 34 free throws. In the second game, St. Thomas outshot Omaha. Omaha still won on the glass, but they had 13 turnovers as well. That definitely didn't help. Resume-wise, these teams are pretty comparable. Omaha is 6-8 against the top 200. Their best win is over St. Thomas. St. Thomas is 7-7 against the top 200. Their best win is over North Dakota State. These teams have a few losses outside the top 200 apiece. Omaha has 3. Their worst one is against Southern Utah at 291. St. Thomas is a little cleaner. I guess they only have 2, but they have a worse bottom end loss. They dropped the game to Oral Roberts at 328. So that's a pretty comparable body of work resume-wise. Stylistically, I think there are advantages St. Thomas's direction, but I don't think they're worth 4.5 points, especially playing at a neutral location. As far as shooting goes, St. Thomas is awesome. This team is second in effective field goal percentage in the country. They're 8th on the inside. They're actually 8th from 3 as well, and they shoot a ton of threes. 38th in three-point attempts per game, three-point rate. Omaha's not that far behind. They are 85th in effective field goal percentage, 47th from 3. Neither of these teams defend well whatsoever. Both teams are outside the top 274 in three-point defense. St. Thomas is a little better at interior defense, 210 to 289, but I'm a little hesitant to say that because they're so much shorter than Omaha. Omaha's 174th in effective height. St. Thomas is 308. That does extend to the glass. We saw that play out in both of their first games. Omaha's 108th in total rebounding. St. Thomas is 336th. And they're outside the top 239 in defensive and offensive rebounding. So it's not a stylistic choice. This team just that's not a strength of theirs. This comes down to just too many points in a game where motivation should be at basically an all-time high. Mathematically, we make this closer to just three flat almost. We have this 79.7 to 76.8. This is one we played pretty quickly at the 4.5 and one we are happy with and we'll take to the window. All right, to close out the stream, we're going to do 2 games in the Sun Belt quickly. It's the Sun Belt semifinals. The first one, Arkansas State plays South Alabama. This is a 5-point spread in favor of Arkansas State. 135 total, no major injuries. Arkansas State had to play yesterday as they do the progressing buys each round. This is South Alabama's first game. There was a 4-way logjam for the regular season title. South Alabama and James Madison won the tiebreakers, so they go all the way to this round without having played. So last time We saw these teams play, actually, the first 2 times. South Alabama won both. They won by 14 at home and 4 on the road. They shot the ball much better in the second game. Arkansas State did dominate on the glass with 14 offensive boards, but it wasn't enough to get them a win in a close game. As far as resumes, Arkansas State 2-0 against the top 100. They beat number 99 Akron in OT. They also beat Memphis. They do have a loss outside the top 200 to Hofstra, which is a little bit concerning, but it's a pretty good body of work. Their next worst loss is to Rice at 188. South Alabama's 2-3 against the top 100. Both of their wins in the top 100 came against Arkansas State. They also played a good game against Ole Miss at 10 points. South Alabama does have a lot more bad losses, though, 6 outside the top 200. And some of them are horrible. They lost to Louisiana Monroe, who's 348th twice. They lost to Western Illinois at 347. A bit concerning. As far as this game and the stylistics, offensive advantage, both offensive and defensive advantage go to Arkansas State slightly, which is interesting because Arkansas State at 116th in offensive efficiency over South Alabama at 184. That doesn't extend to effective shooting. Arkansas State is 255th and South Alabama is 169th. Neither of these teams shoot threes well, and they both take a ton of them. This is pretty hilarious. Arkansas State 61st in three-point rate, 284th in three-point percentage. South Alabama 36th in three-point rate, 269th in three-point percentage. If one team has a rogue hot shooting game, that's going to go a long way in this game. Both teams are pretty good at defending the three, especially Arkansas State. But effective shooting-wise, the 255 number for Arkansas State is concerning versus South Alabama at 169. I do suppose that's neutralized just being better on defense. The biggest gap you'll see here, both teams pretty good at defending the interior, top 35. But South Alabama's a little worse defending the three at 127, so that's at least worth mentioning. However, that sort of ground that's made up in the turnover game where South Alabama is 27th in turnovers forced, Arkansas State is 166th. You also have South Alabama very clean with the foul game. Arkansas State does get into foul trouble at 242nd. On the glass, Arkansas State has a significant advantage. They're 236 in effective fight. South Alabama's 356. We did see this play out. So Arkansas State 85th in rebounding, South Alabama 248th. When you break this game down to sum it up, the biggest advantage is on the glass for Arkansas State. Shooting-wise, it actually favors South Alabama by a little bit. Defensively, is pretty even. Turnover-wise, favors South Alabama a little bit. So to me, this is a very close game on paper. We actually make this closer to the pick'em number than a 5. We make this about -3.5. And I don't think you're getting a tax on South Alabama right now. Or I don't think you're getting a tax on Arkansas State. This team played yesterday. South Alabama did not. So, and it was a close game. Arkansas State only beat Marshall by 3 points. So right away, I would make the efficient number in this game 3.5. And I think you could argue it should be maybe even closer because Arkansas State had to play the day before. So I'm going to play South Alabama at the +5. I do not feel good about it by any means. But when you have two teams that shoot a ton of threes and they're horrible at them, you're going to get weird outcomes. There's going to be a lot of variance in this game. Don't be surprised if the spread flips and South Alabama wins this game by 5. Don't be surprised if they lose by 15. When you have these volatile teams, outcomes of any magnitude could be on the board, but we'll take the points happily in this game. Let's close it out with the second semifinal game in the Sun Belt. Troy plays James Madison. This game has a 3.5-point spread in favor of Troy. Totals 133. Troy just beat Old Dominion yesterday, who has been on a run, but their luck comes to an end. They won 75-59. This is James Madison's first appearance. They had the mega buys. A rematch from February 5th, James Madison won at home 64-61. A very close game. Troy only shot 27% from 3. Troy did win on the glass. They had 15 offensive boards, but it just wasn't enough. They lost the foul battle 19-12. James Madison won there, shooting more free throws. So very close, very greasy game is what it is. James Madison's 1-3 against the top 100. Their best win came over number 90, Arkansas State. From there, they have 2 losses outside the top 200 to Toledo and Texas State. Troy is 1-4 against the top 100. Their best win came against Arkansas State as well. They have 1 loss outside the top 200. That one came to Texas State at 201. But overall, it's a fairly comparable body of work between these two teams. Stylistically, I think the conference was seeded pretty well. I think offensively, James Madison's better. Defensively, Troy's better. And a lot of it's going to shake down to that matchup. On the glass, Troy has an advantage despite being shorter. James Madison 126th in effective height, Troy 195th. But Troy's 31st in rebounding. James Madison's 177th. Troy's also 4th in offensive rebounding, which sort of mitigates their inferior shooting percentages. Troy is 234th in effective field goal. James Madison 163rd. Troy is good scoring inside. They're 90th there. James Madison is not. They're 207th. Just Troy can't hit any threes to save their life. They're 335th in three-point percentage. James Madison is 132nd. Both teams are taking a ton of threes, top 55 in three-point rate. So this is concerning. Overall, the Troy defense is strong across the board. They're a little worse from three, which is where James Madison typically has their success. But it's not a stark advantage one way or the other. It's a pretty neutral matchup. And then on the other side, this James Madison defense is awful overall, but they're worse at defending the three, which Troy can't hit a three to save their life. They're better at defending the inside, 117th, which is where Troy is most efficient. So it doesn't set up as a particularly strong matchup for Troy on paper. They do have the rebounding, of course, which is going to buoy them in a lot of matchups. As far as the turnover game, Troy turns the ball over a ton. They're bottom 30 in the country in turnovers committed, but James Madison doesn't force any. Conversely, Troy turns the ball over a ton. They turn the opponents over a ton, I should say. 38th in turnovers forced. But James Madison's pretty careful with the ball. They're 94th in turnovers committed. This is a pretty even matchup, but it's unlike some of the previous games. There's advantages in both directions that might be a little stark. So we have some strength on strength, some weakness on weakness. Who wins out in a game like this? Troy played yesterday, so I think you have to give at least a little bit of a boost to James Madison being on the mega bye. They haven't played in about a week now. We make this within the 3.5, but not by much. The spread we have is exactly 3. I think you are paying a tax a little bit if you're backing Troy. So I think that is being factored in this matchup where it's not in the Arkansas State one. And anecdotally, I think that kind of makes sense. Arkansas State was the popular pick for people in their whatever conference tournament confidence pools, but I think it's James Madison or pass in this spot. They're the side we show some slight value on. Not sure if we'll play it, but it'll be in Discord if we do. Thank you guys for watching. I ended up going a little longer than I thought we would because I wasn't quite as prepared with daylight savings and these quick turnarounds. Luckily, tomorrow's a little bit lighter. But until then, good luck. We'll see you guys later.